euh, à Charles Prats, en ligne avec ce que nous venons juste de dire.
De Paris et
Is the
aussi
vice president
responsable des
at the
questions de
Tribunal of Paris and also in
terrorisme,
charge of
non terroriste c'est
terrorism
moi, mais fraude fiscale et
and
fraude
or
sociale
fiscal fraud and
au
social
parti
fraud
centriste à l'UDI.
at the French
Charles,
political
vous avez la
party
parole.
UDI. Charles, the floor is yours.
Est-ce que c'est bon, on m'entend?
Can you hear me?
Vous m'entendez, c'est bon techniquement?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Ok. Alors, merci Nathalie. Alors,
Thank you, Natalie.
demandé de parler un
You
petit
asked
peu
me to
de coopération internationale en
speak
matière
to
de
international
blanchiment et
cooperation
de financement du terrorisme.
against money laundering and terrorist financing. Just to introduce myself, I'm a judge
Ce qu'on appelle vice-président chargé des libertés et de la détention au tribunal de Paris.
at the Paris Tribunal, and I have authority over all matters related to taxation, crime, and a terrorist crime. So myself with other colleagues, we decide on investigations and seizures within the framework of the fight against terrorism. So this is very much a Franco-French system. And after that comes the procedures of detention and other investigations related to terrorism. So these matters I'm very much aware of. See them every day. Hopefully don't deal with these matters on a daily basis. This would be very serious. But when there are such matters, they arrive on my desk. So we deal with these on a daily basis, almost. So I bring to the table a very pragmatic, practical experience, and I'm here to tell you about what we can do against these actions and how to improve the mechanisms that we use. So very clearly, international cooperation is material and very important in the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing for a very simple reason. The most part of matters related to money laundering involve many countries. These criminals use many jurisdictions on the international scene to try to muddy the waters and make the work of investigators harder and try to escape justice and also try to escape the seizures of his assets. Obviously, the goals of criminals is to secure his assets and to try to inject them back into the legitimate system. So this is why international sanctions against money laundering at many levels, and also conventions against corruption, bribery, and drug dealing, and drug trafficking, and terrorist financing. These convictions aim at identifying the related crime that was perpetrated abroad. In France, to identify a money laundering activity, we need to prove the source, the criminal source of the funds. Then we can move on to how this money is used, where it is transferred. And all of this, all which happens downstream, is considered as money laundering. So there needs to be an underlying criminal activity. In many cases, criminals will perpetrate crime in other countries before investing his money in France. Traditionally, France is known for investments in real estate, and big times criminals will invest in real estate in France, as is traditionally the case.
On le voit ça régulièrement dans les dossiers, notamment de
We
coopération
regularly see
internationale,
this type of behavior
où un certain nombre de gens qui viennent investir à Paris parce que les gens aiment bien le climat
in
de Paris,
Paris or
de Paris,
elsewhere,
ou sur la côte d'Azur, dans le sud de la
on
France,
the
parce que les gens aiment bien
Côte
cet
d'Azur,
endroit-là. Donc
Ivory
nous savons que nous avons des lieux
the Côte
en
d'Azur
France
or
à
elsewhere in
risque en
France.
matière
So we know that
d'opérations
there are high-risk
d'argent en
areas
provenance criminelle,
for
notamment dans l'immobilier. On peut aussi avoir
criminal
des
money
opérations d'argent,
in
des prises de
corporation.
participation dans des sociétés, etc.
We also have
Et donc,
criminals taking
la
shares in
difficulté
companies.
peut-être de
So
dire, bah voilà,
the difficulty we
le
face
crime
is
initial n'a pas été commis en France, mais
not
l'argent est
knowing
investi en France.
what crime was
Et donc,
perpetrated
si vous
abroad,
voulez
but the
poursuivre la
source of the
personne
money,
pour
the money,
blanchiment
the
des
funds
capitaux,
are
la
criminal
question va être qui va poursuivre.
provenance.
Est-ce que
So
c'est
the question
le
is,
pays dans lequel le crime a été commis initialement
which authority
qui va venir
deals with
poursuivre
this matter?
le criminel
Is
pour
it the
blanchiment des
authorities that
capitaux et
have
donc venir
competence
demander
over
aux
the
autorités françaises
criminal act
d'enquêter et d'assurer une
initially
saisie, des
perpetrated,
avoirs et
and
une confiscation
they then
sur le
deal
territoire
with the
français,
seizure and
ou bien
detention of
est-ce à la justice
person
française
concerned,
d'enquêter
or
et de considérer
is
que le
it a matter
blanchiment
for
s'est fait
the
en
French
France,
justice to
effectivement,
take up,
et que donc la personne
considering
relève
that
de la loi
the
française anti-blanchiment,
money
quand bien
laundering
même le
activity
délit
occurred
initial
in
ou le crime
France,
initial a été commis à
despite the
l'étranger.
fact that the
Pour
initial crime
faciliter
was
les choses, la Convention
perpetrated abroad.
internationale
Now,
demande
to
que les législations des
make
pays
things easier, the
reconnaissent
international
que le
conventions
blanchiment peut exister dans
ask
leur
countries
pays
to
quand bien
recognize that
même le
money
crime a
laundering
été
can
commis
exist
dans
within
un
their
autre
borders,
pays
even
étranger.
if
Et c'est le cas en
initial
France,
crimes
et
were
c'est d'ailleurs pour
perpetrated
cela
abroad.
que vous
This is the
avez
case
un
in
certain nombre de
France,
poursuites
and this is
qui
why
sont
you
exercées en France
have
depuis
criminal
plusieurs
cases in
années
France.
dans ce qu'on
It's been so
appelle
for
les dossiers
years.
de biens mal acquis,
It's what we
où
call
globalement ce sont des dossiers de corruption internationale où des agents publics
ill-acquired
d'États
gains.
étrangers, parfois des anciens ministres, etc., ou leurs proches, leurs familles, ont
Sometimes
détourné
you
des
have
fonds dans ces pays, des fonds publics, et sont venus investir en
politicians
France, et comme je
come
vous
from
disais, notamment
abroad
dans des
and
acquisitions immobilières ou des voitures
are
de luxe,
involved in
etc.
criminal
Et
crime,
donc là, la
in
justice
financial
française
crime, and
considère
invest their money
que nous
in
avons
France.
des
So
faits de blanchiment,
the French justice considers
puisque
that
il y a eu des faits
we
notamment
have
de
evidence of
corruption
money
d'agents
laundering
publics, etc.,
as
dans les pays
there's
d'origine. Et donc, on
activities
considère
related
voilà, que s'il y a
to
eu un
bribery
crime dans le pays
abroad.
d'origine, qui est à
So
l'origine du
if there's
crime,
a
et bien la
crime
personne qui va
abroad,
investir en
which is at
France
the
va
origin of
commettre un
the
blanchiment
funds,
qui sera poursuivi et condamné en
then the
France au
person
titre de
who
la loi
tries to invest
française,
those
puisque
funds in
les
France
éléments
will
constitutifs de
be
l'infraction de blanchiment seront commis sur le
prosecuted
territoire
by the
national,
French
quand bien même
justice,
l'infraction sous-jacente a été commise à l'étranger. Donc
although
ça, c'est
the
quelque chose qui est très important et qu'il faut
activity is
mettre
not
en œuvre dans
clearly
l'ensemble
identifiable
des
as
pays
criminal in
de
France.
manière
It comes from a criminal
véritablement
activity
opérationnelle,
perpetrated
parce que dans
abroad.
les dossiers de blanchiment,
So all of
il n'y a
this
pas
is
de
very
frontière.
important.
Le blanchisseur et
Money
le
laundering has
criminel,
no
lui, se moque des
border.
frontières, ça va très
Criminals
vite,
use all
et donc il
countries.
faut
They
de
can
la même
hop from one
manière, en
country to
parallèle,
another
que les
very
autorités de
easily.
poursuite
So
puissent en quelque sorte
this is
effacer
why
en
relevant
partie
authorities
les frontières nationales pour permettre une
should be
efficacité
able
réelle
to level down
des
the
actions
barriers between
anti-blanchiment.
countries and act on an
Alors, en matière de
international level.
financement du terrorisme, c'est un petit peu
Now, when it
différent,
comes to
puisque
terrorist financing, it's
l'expérience
quite
montre,
different,
en tout
as
cas, on l'a vu dans la plupart des
from my
attentats
experience,
dont la France
at
a
least,
été victime depuis plusieurs années,
we've seen
on a
terrorist
vu que
attacks in
le
France.
coût des
We've seen
opérations
that the
n'était
cost
pas
of
très
operations
élevé en réalité.
was not
Et donc,
so
on est
high,
sur ce
in
qu'on
fact.
appelle du
So
microfinancement de terrorisme,
it's pretty
et
much
qui
a
peut
microfinancing
appeler
of terrorism,
éventuellement à
what we
des
see. And
des
this
opérations de coopération
can lead
internationale
to
pour
international
vérifier d'où viennent les
cooperation,
fonds.
to
Souvent, vous savez,
verify
nous
the
avons
source of funds.
des escroqueries de prestations
Sometimes
sociales.
you
Ça
have
rejoint les problèmes de fraude sociale dont Nathalie
scams,
Goulet nous a parlé tout à l'heure en nous présentant.
social
Donc
benefit
souvent, vous avez
scams.
du financement, du microfinancement d'opérations terroristes ou de groupes terroristes par des escroqueries bancaires,
Scamming, bank
des
scams,
vols, etc.
credit
Donc,
scams,
on est plus
theft.
sur du financement
So
par
here
la
we
criminalité
deal
de droit
with
commun que par des grandes
terrorist
opérations
financing
financières
through
internationales
criminal
traitant
acts
de grandes
rather than
opérations de blanchiment.
grand
On n'a pas vu
international
beaucoup de
operations.
dossiers de
in fact, we don't have many such matters here. Now, what I heard was very interesting when the previous speaker spoke about financing through 1 billion funds financed through a big company. This is very interesting, and this is an example of how Daesh financed itself, and this is very symbolic. We know that this organization had access to large funds through the misuse of a bank, which they pillaged, looted in Iraq. They use cross-border operations in the region and other activities, and thereby had access to funds. And as you know, when it comes to fighting against crime, there's a rule when there are investigations. There's a rule: follow the money. And what's quite relevant here is that for a few years, I don't think there have been big international investigations to try to track the money, and track every operator that was within the stream of this money. For racketeering and trafficking and smuggling of antiquities. We know that these activities exist, and I think it'd be interesting to analyze, to make a case of this ISIS case and try to find the source of the funds, because by doing that, we could realize that the beneficiaries are not necessarily those which we have in mind. There might be a lot of money hidden somewhere that we don't know of. I don't think this would be a very hard endeavor for us to do. We could monitor digital transactions, and we could lay our hands on the pillaged goods and other funds. I think this would be the occasion for a true investigation at the international level to try to locate where the funds and all the assets lie, and to see whether we can seize them. France cannot go at it alone. We need to work at an international level, obviously. And this would be a really interesting investigation, in my view, to try to track the Daesh funds. Now, when it comes to the illicit flows for terrorist financing, the reality is microfinancing, as I told you about. And in this case, it can branch out into bigger financing operations upstream from this, from entities that are not terrorists per se, NGOs and such, which provide aid and abet terrorists or potential terrorists. So this is why it's important, in my view, to have a monitoring regime to deal with these entities, to try to track the funds, because there can be terrorist financing that is indirect. And this would be a matter for international cooperation to deal with. Some types of fundraising operations can be suspect and dealt with. Now, in a practical way, how does the international cooperation take place? Well, for us, it's quite simple. I intervene in the upstream stage. I authorize investigations or seizures
d'une activité criminelle ou du
if
terrorisme.
the funds or assets are identified as coming from terrorist activities. And within the framework of international convention, French authorities are referred to this case, and an investigation is launched. We are asked for our authorization.
Et donc voilà, ça se passe assez simplement.
This is how we deal with such
quand nous sommes saisis,
matters.
le dossier nous arrive.
So when we are referred a case,
rapide, c'est-à-dire que nous travaillons
we
rapidement.
act swiftly.
Quand vous avez des pertes de temps, c'est plutôt au niveau
When there are delays,
en amont.
this mostly occurs at the administrative level, if it goes through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or other departments. But once it comes to the operation level, everything is very swift. Sometimes it can be a little longer, and this explains why there are delays. If there's need for investigation in Saudi Arabia, you would receive on the part of France a request for international cooperation through the conventions that were signed, bilateral and multilateral. In this case, this would be dealt with through diplomatic channels directly, because at the European level, we work from judge to judge. We don't go through political authorities. We directly communicate with each other, mail or by telephone. Now, matters that are not intra-European are a little more complicated, but this is how we deal with this. We use international conventions to uphold the international law.
Puisque ça ne sert à rien de monter des procédures si derrière, au moment du procès, il y a des nullités qui peuvent être soulevées.
And we try to build strong cases so that we don't have cases that collapse under afterwards. So all of this is, in fact, quite simple. It really comes down to political will, legal, judicial will to act. To launch investigations against money laundering and terrorist financing. Let me give you an example very quickly. I very often work within the framework of the Council of Europe, the European Council, sorry.
J'ai fait ça notamment au Maghreb pour le Maroc. Et c'est une anecdote que je vous livre. Donc j'étais en formation pour les
when I was doing my training
gens de l'agence anti-blanchiment et anticorruption du Maroc. Et donc
in Morocco,
et je trouvais que mes collègues
we talked a lot about money laundering, and I was there to provide training, in fact, and I thought the authorities weren't so acquainted with the matters. So I asked the question, how many of you have dealt with money laundering cases? And none of them had. None of them had to deal with such cases for technical reasons, because these cases are dealt through one tribunal, and no one from this type of special tribunal came to my training. And then I was explained, someone explained to me that there were very few such cases that were fully investigated. So this is to tell you that political will is very important to get through the bottom of these. Now, I don't know how many cases of money laundering were in Saudi Arabia, how many criminals were condemned, sanctioned. But in fact, in the beginning, there are very few cases, as is always the case. It takes time to build cases, to wet our weapons in a way, and try to launch investigations. So this does take some time to set the wheels in motion in a way. But once experience is, you acquire experience, and then everything falls into place very quickly. As in my Moroccan example, at the time I said, well, there are many people going to and fro between France and Morocco. There are many criminals and many Moroccan in France and French people in Morocco, which invest big sums of money. So I proposed a win-win situation. You give us the list of real estate assets of Moroccan citizens who have real estate assets in France, and we do the same for you to try to prosecute criminal cases. In this way, we could look into the possibility of money laundering activities. In this case, French citizens who could have committed money laundering and hidden their money in Morocco. And for them, they could obtain the list of Moroccan citizens and criminals and try to see if these criminals had assets abroad linked to terrorism or drug trafficking in this case. So as I explained it to them, it could allow them to deal with hundreds of drug trafficking cases, and in exchange, we could look into possible taxation, tax fraud. And we are still waiting for them to react. They said they perfunctorily said yes to our request, but we're still waiting for them to act. So again, political will is still very important. It's in fact the crunch of it all. We are to fight against money laundering. We need this will. Technical matters are not a real barrier. We can share information very easily when it comes to what person has what assets.
Ça pourrait vous permettre de détecter des phénomènes de fraude fiscale derrière de blanchiment éventuellement de fraude fiscale, etc.
Legislative tools you could detect very easily fraud and money laundering and so on. This is quite simple. These procedures are quite simple. The will comes to be a little lacking sometimes.
C'était aussi le thème de la réunion. On n'était pas que sur le financement du terrorisme. Après, sur le financement du terrorisme, sur la coopération.
And when it comes to terrorist financing,
ce que je pense, c'est que la coopération doit d'abord passer
I think
au niveau
cooperation should first and foremost be between intelligence services. In this case, intelligence services of France and Saudi Arabia. I think this is the right level to deal with these matters, and I think someone else will talk further about this. I think then we need to reach another level, that is financial intelligence services.
L'Arabie Saoudite, la FIU saoudienne fait partie du groupe Egmont. Et bon, les gens de Tracfin pourront peut-être mieux nous en parler.
Maybe people from Tracfin will
vous avez cette
accurate about
cette
than me.
facilité, cette souplesse
But I think
entre les financial
sharing intelligence between FIUs has occurred for a long time, and there's real experience there. I remember talking with Jean-Paul Garcia, the former director of Tracfin, about a case in the 80s. And I saw that FIUs are really efficient, very swift, and it's much faster than international legal cooperation, legal assistance. And this can help build strong cases in a very swift way. What would take months in legal assistance through legal assistance channels would just only take days through this latter way of dealing with it.
Donc vraiment, j'insiste là-dessus.
So I really emphasize this point. The first steps of cooperation should go through
chez nous, et puis on parle l'équivalent chez vous, de mémoire d'un déjeuner qu'on avait eu
like Tratfen in France and other agencies in Saudi Arabia. I think the central bank in Saudi Arabia deals with this specifically.
C'est vraiment la base. Et j'aurais tendance à dire, au-delà des coopérations institutionnelles,
and beyond institutional cooperation, what really works, and I can tell you this as a practitioner, are personal relations. People meet and learn how to know each other. We need judges to communicate with each other. We need all services to connect, to liaise. And this would further accelerate the cases. Because once you know someone, you can directly communicate with that person, mail or telephone, and this really brings matters very quickly to a resolution. If you have any questions, I will take any questions you might have.
Merci.
And
c'est bon, on tient, tout va
I'll
bien?
stop now.
Vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me?
Vous m'entendez? C'est bon?
Can you hear me?
Merci. Merci
Thank
beaucoup,
you.
Charles. Oui,
Thank
alors,
you, Charles.
Charles Pratt est un
Charles
excellent
Pratt is
praticien, comme vous le
An
voyez.
excellent practitioner, as you can
Je
see.
rends hommage à nos
He's got practical
traducteurs
experience. I
qui ont
really pay tribute to
sûrement
our interpreters.
dû activer parce
Really
qu'ils
had
parlent
to,
très vite. Mais je voudrais retenir deux
use their
choses.
deep
Une
bench.
chose est probablement la nécessité d'un
Now, I'd just like
workshop
to say one
avec les
thing,
autorités
the
judiciaires,
necessity
parce que là
to hold
aussi,
a
les
workshop with
autorités que nous avons aujourd'hui ne sont pas les
judicial
seules en cause,
authorities.
donc peut-être qu'il faudra penser à
It's important to have
coopération
their input.
judiciaire,
I
ça
think
me
we
semble
will
important.
need to talk about
Et
international
puis,
cooperation in
l'autre
judicial terms.
sujet qui me
And I think
semble
the
aussi
other
important,
point, which
c'est
is
de pouvoir
just as important,
probablement
is
venir quand les conditions s'y prêteront en Arabie
to
Saoudite
come
pour
to go to
rencontrer
Saudi
ces
Arabia
autorités
physically,
judiciaires
to meet
et
legal
pouvoir
authorities,
mener des opérations de
try
plus
to
de coopération.
to have more
Donc,
increased cooperation.
l'expérience que vient de nous retracer
So the
le juge
experience
Prats,
that
c'est extrêmement
was
important.
brought to us
Il y avait
by
beaucoup d'éléments
Charles
judiciaires,
Prats is
alors
very important. There are many
qui
legal cases,
probablement
legal
ne relèvent
elements
pas de la compétence
in
des
the
gens qui
points
sont autour de la
that
table aujourd'hui, mais
are
on
not
voit
the
bien le lien, et
not
puis
matters
ça
for
fait le
people
lien
here
très
to deal with,
clairement
but
avec ce que nous a
this
dit
is
Ganem
relevant to
HCIB, c'est
our
encore une
works,
question de
our
volonté
work.
politique.
And again,
On
a
retrouve
very
la même
important
chose, c'est
point was
toujours une question
the
de volonté
importance of
politique.
political
Comme disent les
will.
Italiens, et je vais le dire moins
As
bien que
Italians
notre ami Oda,
said,
qui parle aussi si bien italien, c'est entre le dire et le faire, il y a la moitié de la mer. Alors, il suffit maintenant
between
de se
speaking
rapprocher un
and
peu pour
doing,
essayer
there's
de donner
there's a big gap.
une consistance
We need to walk the
pratique
talk.
à
So
toute la théorie
again,
dont on est en train de parler maintenant, même s'il y a eu beaucoup de progrès.